Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Truth and Fertility podcast. So when this comes out, we are entering into the full-blown Christmas season, and there is a lot of joy, of course, with this season, right? Celebrating Jesus and celebrating just time with family, and, there should be a lot of joy. Now, with this season, though, with all the joy, there can also be some stress that comes with this season, whether it's stress of budgeting to make sure that, you're budgeting well for all of your Christmas gifts that you're buying, or, if some people struggle with family and that's sometimes stressful, or just whatever it is, right? And there's also a lot going on too. I think starting like the 19th of December, my family has something going on like every single evening up until Christmas. It's just a lot. And as fun as it is, right? And we do it because it's fun, because it brings joy, but it can also bring some stress. So with this, with all of this stress that's happening sometime around this time of season, but really just any time of year, right? We have stressful events that come up in our life. And so today I really want to dive into how does this affect our fertility? Because our fertility, our menstrual cycle is actually responding to that stress that we are experiencing. So today I'm gonna kind of iron out for you like exactly how stress can affect the menstrual cycle and ways to look out for a possible, either long or irregular cycle because of that stress. So let's get into that. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility podcast. My name is Haley and I am your host. I work at an OBGYN clinic where I teach women and couples how to chart their cycles so they can either achieve or avoid pregnancy, and also to manage their fertility. I have a huge passion to teach women and couples about the beauty of their fertility and how the pill is never the answer to women's health. There's a lot of good and not so good information out there about fertility. And so my goal with this podcast is to help you sort out the truth from the weeds. I want to teach you how to chart your cycle and to reach your family planning goals while also even possibly locating hormonal imbalances and to receive proper treatment. I want to help you get in the best hands that you can with the best doctors that you can to reach optimal reproductive health. So if you're ready to get on this journey with me to learn more about your reproductive system, how it was created and how it should be working, and the best medicine in order to make it work if it is not, you are in the right place. I pray that this blesses you. So let's get to it. Okay, so one thing I want to clarify really quick is when we're talking about stress and how stress can affect the menstrual cycle, I am more talking about an acute stress versus like a chronic stress. So oftentimes when I'm working with women and couples and I'm asking them questions about stress just to see if we can see anything on their fertility chart that points to their cycle kind of responding to the stress. The question I start out with is, have you been experiencing any stress in the last, I usually ask like 10 to 15 days. And so many times I get women giving me this look of like, is that even a question? Like, of course I'm stressed. And that's also just a testament to just how busy and crazy our lives are nowadays. And I think that needs to be addressed too. But I digress. When I'm talking about stress, though, I have to remind them that I'm not talking about a chronic stress when it comes to fertility. I'm not talking about, okay, you have a stressful job or you have a stressful event in your life, right? There's different things that can cause that chronic stress where it's just, you're just generally stressed all the time, right? Now, then there's an acute stress, and that's more of the stress that I'm talking about. It's more of a stress that that has like an end date to it. So if I'm working with a student, I'll usually say finals week. Finals week is an acute stress. Or when I'm working with marriage prep couples, if they're getting prepared for their wedding and they're learning NFP to use in their marriage to avoid or achieve pregnancy, I usually tell them, okay, the whole engagement process, like there's the whole time that you're engaged is chronic stress. But the week before your wedding is acute stress. So that's just kind of to give you an idea of what I mean by an acute stress. It's a stress that comes up, but it's temporary. It has an end date to it, right? Illness can also be a stress, right? Even if that's not necessarily a mental stress, which sometimes it can be, but also just physical stress can affect our fertility. And so an illness or something like that where it's an acute stress. So just wanted to kind of iron that out first. We're talking about an acute stress in just the way that it affects your cycle. So what happens when you, as a woman, experience this acute stress is your body actually kind of takes over, and your body recognizes that stress. It doesn't know what kind of stress it is. It could even be a positive stress, right? It could be preparing for a wedding, right? That can be a positive stress. There's good things going on, but it's still out of your norm. And so your body recognizes that as a stress, right? No matter what it is, it recognizes it as a stress. And so your body goes into a protective mode. So what happens is your body says, ooh, okay, there's this stress going on. This probably isn't the best time to get pregnant because you're stressed already. And so what your body does is it says, okay, not a good time to get pregnant. I'm going to delay ovulation from happening for another maybe week, maybe 2 weeks. It shouldn't be that long, but your body naturally delays ovulation until that stress is relieved. Once that stress is relieved, then your body says, okay, we are good. Like we're past the stress. We're good. We can relax and we can resume normal procedure. And then your body ovulates. So your body literally, it has this protective mode to say, there is a stress happening. This is not okay. We're going into fight or flight response, right? And things stop. Your body naturally suppresses ovulation from happening, because let's remember, ovulation is when an egg is released from your ovary. And when the egg is released, that's when, if a woman were to have intercourse, pregnancy could occur, right? Because there's a viable egg, and if sperm meets that egg, bam, you got a pregnancy, you have a new life. So your body will naturally delay that process and say, not a good time yet, let's delay it. Now, usually your body will pick up normal procedure, ovulation procedure, about a week or 2 weeks later, just depending on how hard the stress was, how long it lasted, and that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all. Some women are only delayed a few days. Some women are never delayed. Some women's bodies are just not as sensitive to it as others. Sometimes women can have the most amount of stress and never experience a delayed ovulation because of that. Now, other women, it could be the smallest thing happens and bam, they have a long cycle. So everybody's body responds to it differently, but there is just this general idea that your body has a protective mechanism to say, ooh, okay, not a good time to get pregnant. Let's delay this ovulation. Okay, so how do we see that on a chart then? So when I'm teaching women and couples how to chart their cycles to understand their fertility, know when they're fertile, a woman is not always fertile, right? There's only a very small amount of time during a woman's menstrual cycle where she could actually get pregnant if she were to have intercourse. And so by charting your cycle, you're trying to figure out when that fertile window is. If they're trying to avoid pregnancy, they would abstain from intercourse during that fertile window to not get pregnant. Or if they were trying to achieve pregnancy, they would do the opposite, right? They would try to focus intercourse during that fertile window. And so there's a small amount of time where the woman could actually get pregnant. And so there's different signs that her body gives to tell her when that time is. And across the board, the most common sign that a woman is looking for is her discharge or her cervical mucus. And I have plenty of other podcast episodes that go into the biology of this. I actually have a whole podcast just on cervical mucus, so I'll link that in the show notes below for you guys to check out. But that is what a woman is observing to understand her fertility. And so when you have a stress, we call it a stress cycle. It's a cycle that's longer because stress had delayed ovulation. What that can look like is your body, starting at cycle day 1, which is the first day of your period. That's a brand new cycle. Your period happens, okay, then the bleeding tapers off, okay. Now most women, and I'm talking about a very generalized regular cycle, Okay. Most women will have a few dry days right after her period. So she'll have no cervical mucus at all. She's not seeing any discharge. And then as estrogen begins to rise, which is the hormone that produces or tells the cervix to produce that cervical mucus, as estrogen rises, the cervix will start producing that discharge. And when it starts out, as estrogen is just starting to rise, that discharge might look kind of cloudy, kind of clumpy, not very stretchy, not very slippery. But as estrogen continues to rise, it'll start to get more stretchy, more clear, more what we call lubricative or really slippery when you wipe. And so these are signs of fertility. Your mucus, your cervical mucus, is a sign of fertility. And so with that, what can happen is when you're experiencing stress around the time of ovulation, so as estrogen begins to rise, estrogen usually peaks the day before you ovulate. So estrogen will rise, you'll have a whole lot of cervical mucus at that time, and then the next day, estrogen drops very significantly, and you could go from having a bunch of mucus one day to being completely dry the next. And that's a good indication of that ovulatory event, right? So that is right around the time of ovulation when estrogen drops significantly, and that is when ovulation happens. And then what should happen after that is you should be dry for the remainder of that cycle. Progesterone starts to rise, that becomes the dominant hormone, and that hormone does the exact opposite of estrogen. It actually dries all of your cervical mucus up. And so it should stay dry for the remainder of that cycle until you have your next period and the whole thing starts over again, right? So what can happen with stress, I explain all of this just to say that with stress, how I teach my clients to kind of almost prepare themselves for an elongated stress cycle is to look for these signs, but also being aware of the stress that's going on. So I actually just had a client I was working with who had a stress cycle. And so she was going through her regular cycle, everything looked super normal, and she had what we call a peak. So that's like the day that you have the most fertile mucus, right? It's the most slippery, most clear, most stretchy mucus, right? So she had that peak, and then it started going back down. So she started to see less and less mucus, started to get dry. Okay, we thought she ovulated, great. But then all of a sudden, rather than staying dry for the rest of the cycle, she had another peak where her mucus started to rise again and get, again, more slippery, more clear, more stretchy. And so she had a second peak. And then it went right back down. Now, right around the time of her first peak, the first time estrogen started to rise and produce that mucus, she was going through a really stressful event in her life. And it was a very personal thing that happened. And so, but she actually, when we were kind of investigating and I was asking her a bunch of questions, she didn't even recognize that as a super stressful event. Something happened out of the norm, but it wasn't that, like, her mentally, she wasn't super rocked by it. And so she didn't really think that could actually affect her cycle. But what I told her is that, okay, well, we're looking at this right now. We're looking at your cycle, and it's pretty clear that you had what we call a double peak, where you have two peaks. And what happens is that first peak, your body recognizes that stress and says, ooh, okay, we were almost going to ovulate. We were right there, but we're gonna pause that because we're recognizing that stress. Your body's gonna pause that and go back down to a baseline. And then when your body feels that it's safe to ovulate again, then you'll have that second rise of mucus, or that second rise of estrogen to that second peak. And it's that second peak that you actually ovulate, when your body, realizes, okay, things are safe again. And so even with this woman that I was working with, she didn't actually even think of this event as a very stressful event, but it was definitely out of the norm, out of the ordinary that she normally experiences. And so what I told her is that sometimes your mind doesn't perceive something as stressful, but your body does. So if you guys have kind of heard the saying, right, like your body keeps the score. There's actually a book called Your Body Keeps the Score. Your body can sense that stress even before your mind actually picks up on it. And so I told her that okay, maybe for her body is just more affected by stress. And so she's more susceptible to having that delayed ovulation. And so, and it all just kind of fit. All the puzzle pieces started coming together, and we realized why she was having a longer cycle than normal. Now, one thing to note here too that I probably should have said earlier, but it's fine, we're saying it now, is that there's 2 different phases of the cycle, and they hinge on ovulation. So ovulation is the main event of your cycle. And so before ovulation, we have the pre-ovulatory phase, and then post-ovulation, we have the post-ovulatory phase. Okay, so 2 different phases. One is pre-ovulation, one's post-ovulation. The day of ovulation is associated with the pre-ovulation phase. So post-ovulation phase does not include ovulation, but the pre-ovulation phase does. So just explaining that really quick. And then it's also important to know that the post-ovulation phase is very stable in length. So even for women who have super irregular cycles, if they're charting their cycle and they can pinpoint the time of ovulation, they will still know, okay, I have about 2 weeks left and then I get my next period. So for generally almost across the board for all women, no matter what type of cycle that you have, once you actually ovulate, it's usually a very stable amount of time until your next period. And it's usually about 2 weeks. Now, before ovulation, that phase can be a lot more variable. And so when you have this elongated cycle, it's usually because that pre-ovulation phase is being elongated. It's not the post-ovulation phase. And so you're kind of just waiting for ovulation to happen. And so with stress, if stress can suppress ovulation, what it's doing is it's just elongating that pre-ovulation phase. So you're still waiting for ovulation to happen. So when I'm working with women that are, especially if they're using this, if they're charting their cycle for family planning purposes, what's really important is to recognize if there is any stress or possible just events that are out of the ordinary, right? That could be happening. And usually I say about 10 to 15 days before we see signs of ovulation. And so if I ask the question, okay, have you experienced any stress in the last 10 or 15 days before ovulation? And they say yes, then I say, okay, let's actually anticipate a double peak happening. Let's anticipate another kind of episode of mucus before we actually get to true ovulation. Now, down the road, as we collect more data on women and we start to recognize, each woman individually starts to recognize her patterns, what her body is more sensitive to and not sensitive to, we start to adjust. But at the very beginning, when we don't know how susceptible a woman's body is to stress, I always say, okay, if you have had some acute stress happening in the last 10, 15 days before ovulation, it's a good idea to still consider yourself fertile even after you see that first peak or that first sign of mucus, because it could happen that ovulation might still be coming. It may not have already happened. So that is kind of more so getting into the weeds of things too. And when I'm working with women, I really, really get detailed on, okay, what days are you experiencing stress? How is this going to affect your cycle? All of that. So I'm not saying that to confuse you by any means, but I am just saying that stress absolutely has an effect on our cycle. So as we are going into the holiday season, the Christmas season, and we might be experiencing more stress that is coming up, whether again, it's with family or budget or whatever it is, be on the lookout for that. This might be a good time to really look at this next cycle that you're about to enter into, or if you've just entered it, you've just had your period maybe, and start to recognize if there is any stressful events going on. And if so, see what happens with your cycle. See if it is any longer than it normally is. And that can be a clue in for you to show how our bodies are susceptible to stress. That is a protective mechanism from our body, right? There's nothing broken about it. This is the way that our bodies were created. It was created to recognize this stress and say, okay, not a good time to get pregnant right now. So it suppresses ovulation until your body feels that it is safe again to ovulate and safe again to get pregnant possibly. So now, what are ways that we can relieve stress too? We want to always be cognizant of, stress isn't just affecting our cycle, it's affecting our whole body. It's affecting us mentally. There's plenty of other consequences from stress that can happen even outside of our fertility, right? So just for the sake of health, reproductive health, and just health in general, we want to make sure that we are still taking care of ourselves. So find something that really helps you to alleviate that stress. Oftentimes for me, I have 3 little ones. I have 3 kids under 5 right now. I won't be able to say that much longer because my oldest son is almost 5. But this is a stressful time in my life right now, right? It's very joyful and there's a lot of laughter and just it's beautiful. And I love having a big family and I hope to have a bigger one. But right now it is just stressful. And so something I've found for myself is when I'm able to just be on my own, even if it's just for a morning. And if I have really gracious friends that we trade kids so that we can have those moments to ourselves, right? Or my parents and my husband's parents are super generous too with their time. So that is really helpful for me. I know some women love taking baths at night and that's very calming for them. Other women, it's singing or playing music and just listening to music or whatever is for you. Oh, and exercise. That is super helpful too, just with alleviating that stress from your body. So find ways, especially in this season or any season where you're feeling a lot of stress, really try to find ways just to have that self-care and to be protective of your health, of your mental health, of your stress levels, because you can't, you think of the idea of having a full cup, right? And especially if you're a mother, or even if you're not a mother, but women I feel like we're constantly just giving of ourselves in different capacities. And so as we're giving of ourselves, we can't give something we don't have, right? So you think of a full cup, we have to give from our overflow. If we're constantly pouring our cup out, we don't have anything left to give. And that's when our health and our reproductive health specifically really starts to get the brunt of that. So we need to make sure that our cup is filled so that we have even excess to give to others, to give to our kids, to give to our family, to give to our friends, whoever it is. And so really this time of year, especially making sure that you are taking time to say no to things that are excessive and to say yes to giving yourself that time that you need, asking a friend, asking a family member, asking your husband for help. That's always a good place to start. So again, as I'm wrapping up this episode, let's just think about how our bodies and our reproductive system could be affected by stress and really start to pay attention to that right now in this time. See if your cycle is affected by it, just to know about yourself more, know about your body more. This is collecting data, right? You're collecting data about your body. And if you are interested in learning how to chart your cycle, I do teach virtually and I am open to taking on new clients right now. So if you are interested in learning how to chart your cycle, you can visit truthandfertility.com and just go to the little contact button at the top, shoot me an email, just telling me that you are interested and we can get started with that. I would love to walk you through that process and to teach you how to chart your cycle, whether it's for health reasons or if it's for family planning or both too. Both is always great as well. So no matter what reason it is, I have a whole lot of heart for that, a huge passion for that. And you just become so much more aware of your body, even talking about stress, right? You become so much more aware of how your body reacts to different things. And it's very empowering to know that, to know your body, to know your cycle, and to just be able to to kind of predict, right? Predict what might happen because you know your body so well. So again, if you're interested in learning how to chart, just go to truthinfertility.com and go to the contact button, shoot me an email, and I would love to work with you. So this is the end of this podcast. I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas season, and I will talk to you again in the new year.